The red lights flashed at the end of the long concrete hallway. Every steel door in the prison slammed shut at the same time. The sound echoed like thunder underground. Security cameras froze for half a second, then came back on, but something was wrong. One camera showed an empty hallway that should not have been empty. Another showed a cell door that was open during full lockdown. Deep inside the prison, an alarm began to scream. This was not a drill. This was the moment prison officials feared more than anything. During lockdown inside America's most secure prison, something had gone terribly wrong, and no one yet knew how far it would go. The control room went silent as officers stared at their screens. One officer leaned closer to a monitor. His hands shook. A red dot blinked on the screen, signaling a breach. Then another dot appeared. Then a third. Someone was not where they were supposed to be. And at that exact moment, a head count showed one inmate was missing. No one moved. No one spoke. The prison had been designed so this could never happen. The walls were too thick. The doors were too strong. The systems were laid and tested. But here it was, a missing inmate during lockdown. What happened next would change the prison forever. The prison sat far from any city, surrounded by empty land and tall fences. From the outside, it looked quiet, calm, almost peaceful. But inside, everything was built for control. Every step, every door, every second of the day was planned. This prison held the most dangerous offenders in the country. Men who could not be housed anywhere else. Men who had broken rules in other prisons. Men who knew how to manipulate systems. Lockdown was the strictest part of prison life. During lockdown, inmates stayed inside their cells. No movement, no talking, no mistakes. Guards followed exact rules. Every door was tracked by computers. Every inmate was counted again and again. That night, lockdown began like it always did. At 9 p.m., the lights dimmed. At 9:05 p.m., cell doors locked. At 9:10 p.m., officers confirmed all sections were sealed. Nothing unusual showed on the screens, but problems often begin quietly. Earlier that day, Officer Mark Lewis had noticed something strange. During the afternoon check, one inmate stood too close to the door. His eyes followed the officer instead of looking down. That was not normal. Most inmates avoided eye contact. The inmate's name was Daniel Carter. Daniel Carter had been in the prison for 8 years. He had a clean record inside. No fights, no trouble. He kept to himself. He followed orders. That made him easy to overlook. During dinner, another officer noticed that Carter finished his meal but stayed seated longer than usual. When told to move, he complied without complaint. Small things. Nothing serious. By 8:45 p.m., the prison prepared for lockdown. Officers returned to their stations. The control room ran system checks. Green lights across the board. At 9 p.m., the announcement played over the speakers. Lockdown. Doors slammed shut. Everything seemed normal. But in the control room, one of the newer officers noticed a brief flicker on a screen. Just for a second. He almost ignored it. Cameras sometimes glitched. The system was old in some areas. Then another screen flickered. And then the red lights appeared. By the time the alarm sounded, officers rushed into motion. Training took over. Gates were sealed again. Emergency procedures began. A full lockdown inside the prison. Officer Lewis was ordered to his section. He moved fast down the corridor, boots echoing on the floor. The air felt heavier than usual. His radio crackled with short messages from other units. He stopped in front of a cell and checked the number. Daniel Carter's cell. The door was closed. Lewis scanned his card. The system beeped. Status showed locked. Everything looked right. But something felt wrong. He leaned closer. The door was unlocked. His heart dropped. Lewis stepped back and called it in. His voice stayed calm, but his chest felt tight. Backup was sent. Control room confirmed the error. Or what looked like an error. The cell door slowly slid open. The cell was empty. The bed was made. No signs of damage. No broken locks. No forced entry. Daniel Carter was gone. The control room froze all other movement. Every officer was ordered to stop where they were unless directed. Search teams formed immediately. The prison's design meant there were only a few places an inmate could go, unless someone knew the blind spots. The prison had hidden maintenance paths, older tunnels, areas not used in years. Maps existed, but few officers had ever seen them, and even fewer inmates should have known about them. Records were pulled fast. Carter had worked maintenance several years ago. He had cleaned storage rooms. He had moved cats. He had listened, watched, remembered. Search teams checked nearby cells. All other inmates were accounted for. No signs of forced doors. No alarms until lockdown hit. That meant Carter moved just before or during lockdown. That should have been impossible. Minutes passed. 10. 15. Officers searched calmly but quickly. Cameras were checked again. One camera near service hallway showed a shadow passing just before it shut down. The image was blurry. The figure moved with purpose. Not running. Not panicking. Walking. The realization hit hard. This was planned. Outside the prison, additional security arrived. Roadblocks went up. Helicopters prepared to launch but waited for confirmation. The prison had never lost an inmate during lockdown before. Inside, tension grew with every second. Officer Lewis stood with his team near sealed corridor. He thought about the small moments earlier that day. The eye contact, the waiting, the calm. Daniel Carter had known. The warden arrived at the control room. Her face was serious, but controlled. She had overseen the prison for over a decade. She knew every rule, every weakness. This was her worst fear. A full emergency search was ordered. Older sections were unlocked under supervision. Maintenance tunnels were checked. Then a report came in. Motion detected in Section D. Section D was closed years ago. Officers moved carefully. Lights flickered on as they entered the cold, unused hallway. Dust lined the floor. The air smelled stale. No one was supposed to be here. A flashlight beam caught something on the wall. Fresh markings. Footprints in the dust. They followed the trail. It led to a heavy door at the end of the hall. The door was supposed to be sealed and welded shut. It was open. Behind it was a narrow passage leading downward. The radio went quiet for a moment. Then Officer Lewis spoke. They had found where Daniel Carter went, but they still did not know where it ended. The team prepared to move in. As they stepped forward, the lights in the passage suddenly went out. Complete darkness. And from deep inside the tunnel, a loud metallic sound echoed, like another door opening. Something else was happening, and lockdown inside America's most secure prison was far from under control. The darkness swallowed the tunnel. Officer Mark Lewis froze at the entrance. His flashlight beam bounced uselessly off the black walls. The air felt colder down there, damp and tight, like the prison itself was holding its breath. Then came the sound again. Metal scraping against metal. Someone was moving deeper inside the prison. Lewis raised his hand. The team stopped. Radios crackled softly as officers whispered updates. Power was still on in the main prison, which meant the blackout was local. Someone had cut the lights in this old tunnel on purpose. That meant Daniel Carter was not just hiding. He was controlling the moment. Backup was requested, but time felt dangerous now. Every second gave Carter space to move. The tunnel did not appear on modern maps. Only older blueprints showed pieces of it. No one was sure where it led. Lewis stepped forward. The team followed. Flashlights cut narrow paths through the dark as they moved slowly. Boots echoed softly. The walls were rough concrete, marked with peeling numbers and rust stains. This place had not been used in decades. Carter had known exactly where to go. Suddenly, the tunnel split into two paths. Lewis cursed under his breath but stayed focused. One path sloped downward. The other stayed level and led toward an old service wing. They split into teams. Lewis took the downward path. The farther they went, the more signs they saw. Scuffed dust, a dropped plastic tie, fresh marks on a door frame. Carter was close. Then the tunnel ended at a secured maintenance door. The lock panel blinked red. Someone had just used it. Before anyone could react, a loud clang echoed behind them. The lights snapped back on all at once. Too bright, too fast. Lewis spun around. A steel gate had dropped from the ceiling behind them. They were trapped inside the tunnel. Above ground, the control room erupted. Multiple alerts flashed at the same time. Unauthorized access. Power reroute. Manual overrides failing one after another. The warden stared at the screens, eyes wide. This was no longer one missing inmate. This was a prison-wide threat. Back in the tunnel, Lewis radioed for help. Static answered him. Signal was weak underground. He ordered his team to stay calm. Panic would only make things worse. The maintenance door in front of them began to open slowly. Lewis raised his weapon but did not fire. Daniel Carter stepped into the light. He looked calm. Too calm. His hands were empty. His uniform was neat. He did not run. He just stood there. For a moment, no one moved. Then Carter spoke softly, telling them to stay back. He warned them that if they moved forward, Something bad would happen elsewhere in the prison. Lewis did not need details to understand. This was leverage. Carter had planned for capture. Lewis ordered his team to stand down but stay ready. He tried to talk Carter into surrendering. Carter listened, nodded, smiled slightly. Then he pressed a button on a small device in his hand. Elsewhere in the prison, alarms exploded. Cell doors in one entire block unlocked at the same time. Inmates poured into the hallways, confused and shouting. Officers shouted commands. Sirens wailed. Control was slipping fast. The warden watched the screens in horror. This was what the prison was built to prevent. A near riot. Lewis realized the truth too late. Carter was not trying to escape. He was exposing weaknesses. Carter began to back away into the maintenance room. Lewis lunged forward. The gate behind them suddenly lifted. Backup rushed in. Carter bolted. Officers chased him through the narrow space. The maintenance room opened into a long-forgotten corridor that led back toward the active prison blocks. That was the worst place he could go. Officers tackled inmates in the unlocked block as others followed Carter's trail. Tear gas was prepared but not used. The goal was control, not chaos. Carter reached a control station inside the old corridor. He slammed another button before anyone could stop him. Emergency lockdown activated again. But this time, it trapped both inmates and officers together in several sections. One officer went missing in the confusion. The near riot teetered on the edge of becoming something worse. Lewis finally tackled Carter near the end of the corridor. They hit the floor hard. Carter struggled but did not scream. Officers restrained him. The device skidded across the floor and shattered. Silence slowly returned. Over the next hour, officers regained control block by block. Inmates were secured. No one escaped the prison. But the damage was done. One officer was injured. Systems were compromised. And the idea that the prison was perfect was gone. Carter was placed in full isolation under armed watch. Investigators learned later that he had spent years memorizing systems, watching patterns, and exploiting old maintenance access that was never fully removed. He had not wanted freedom. He wanted proof. Proof that even America's most secure prison could fail. The incident was never called a riot. Official reports labeled it a controlled disturbance. But inside the prison, everyone knew the truth. They had been minutes away from disaster. And the question that haunted every officer afterward was simple. If Daniel Carter could do this alone, who else was waiting? The prison did not sleep after the lockdown. Even when the lights were steady and the alarms were silent, tension stayed in the air. Officers walked slower. Doors were checked twice. Cameras were watched without blinking. Daniel Carter sat alone. His new cell was smaller than the last. Thicker walls, fewer openings. One camera directly above him, another behind reinforced glass. Two officers outside at all times. He had been stripped of everything, except his mind. Investigators arrived before sunrise. Federal agents, prison security experts, systems engineers. They all wanted one thing. Answers. How did one inmate come so close to tearing open the most secure prison in the country? They began with logs and records. Power systems, door controls, old blueprints. Hours passed as they searched. Then one agent stopped. He found something no one expected. The maintenance tunnel Carter used was not the real problem. It was only the first door. The real danger was deeper. During lockdown, investigators discovered Carter had accessed a restricted diagnostic network weeks earlier. It was meant only for testing systems during construction. Everyone believed it had been disconnected years ago. It was not. Carter had quietly mapped it, piece by piece, never triggering alarms, never moving too fast. He had shared nothing with other inmates. No messages, no signals, no signs. That made it worse, because it meant he had done it alone. Officer Mark Lewis was called in to review the findings. As he watched the report scroll past, his stomach tightened. Carter did not just expose weaknesses. He proved the prison could be controlled from the inside, and there was no proof he had shown everything. Lewis asked the question no one wanted to answer. What if this was not the end? That same night, something strange happened. A camera feed in the isolation wing froze for exactly 12 seconds. Not long enough to alert the main system, but long enough to be noticed by a human eye. When the feed returned, Daniel Carter was standing instead of sitting. He was facing the camera. He was smiling. Officers entered the cell immediately. Carter had not moved from his marked position. His hands were visible. He had nothing with him. They searched the room. Nothing. No tools. No damage. No explanation. But one officer noticed something written in faint scratches near the floor, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. 3 words. Not fixed yet. The room went silent. Carter was restrained and moved again. This time to a cell no inmate had used before. One that had never been part of any map. The warden ordered a full external review of the prison. Billions of dollars in upgrades were approved overnight. Entire systems were shut down and rebuilt. Publicly, the story faded fast. No riots, no escapes, no deaths. Just a security incident during lockdown. But inside federal circles, the incident was studied again and again. Training videos were made. New rules were written. And one message spread quietly through every major U.S. prison. Security is never finished. As for Daniel Carter, he was never seen on camera again without multiple layers of backup systems running. He never spoke about that night. He never confessed. He never denied anything. But officers who walked past his final cell said the same thing. He always looked calm, as if he already knew the ending. And somewhere deep inside the prison, where old systems once slept, engineers still say they hear phantom alerts during routine checks. Alerts with no source, no record, and no clear fix. The lockdown was over, but the fear it caused never truly left. Weeks passed, but the prison never returned to normal. Every door test took longer. Every shift briefing felt tense. Officers trusted procedures, but they no longer trusted silence. Silence had become the warning. Daniel Carter remained locked away. He had no contact with other inmates. Meals were delivered by machines. Orders came through speakers. Every movement was logged. Still, problems continued. Small ones at first. Lights dimmed for a second in areas far from Carter's cell. A door took half a second too long to close. A camera reset without being touched. Each issue had an explanation. Old wiring, software delays, human error. But the pattern was growing. A federal review team took over daily operations. New systems replaced old ones. Engineers worked non-stop. Walls were opened. Cables replaced. Code rewritten. The prison was becoming newer, stronger. Yet during one late-night test, a system engineer froze. On a rebuilt console that had never been connected to the old network, a line of text appeared. System ready. The engineer called it in. Supervisors checked logs. There was no command, no access request, no user recorded. The console should not have been talking to anything. A full lockdown was ordered again. This time quieter. No alarms, no announcements, just doors sealing one by one. Inside his cell, Daniel Carter sat calmly. Monitors showed he had not moved for hours. Then his heart rate changed, just slightly. Officers noticed the shift and moved closer. Medical teams were alerted. Everything was watched. At the exact moment the final sector sealed, the diagnostic network came back online. The one everyone believed was gone. It lit up across several screens at once. Engineers tried to shut it down. The system ignored them. Instead, it began running checks. Old checks. Commands that matched blueprints from decades earlier. It was not attacking. It was preparing. Warden Helen Price stood in the control room and made the hardest call of her career. She ordered the entire prison disconnected from external systems. No internet. No remote access. No updates. Total isolation. The prison went dark to the outside world. Inside, emergency systems took over. Lights stayed on. Doors remained sealed. For a moment, it worked. Then one cell door unlocked halfway. Not Carter's. Another inmate. A man with no record of technical skills. No history of trouble. No reason to be involved. Guards rushed in and restrained him quickly. He kept saying the same thing over and over. He said the door opened by itself. He said the voice told him to wait. Investigators reviewed the audio logs. There was no voice recorded, but there was a signal. A pulse sent through the internal system at the exact second the door opened. It was coming from inside the prison, from a place no one expected. The maintenance wing. The same wing from the first lockdown. Teams moved fast. Armed officers sealed the tunnels. Drones were sent in first. The video feed showed something that made everyone stop breathing. A panel had been removed. Behind it was a device no one had logged. Small. Simple. Old. It was not connected to the new systems. It was connected to the walls. To lines no one thought still carried data. The device powered down as officers approached. Like it knew it had been found. Back in isolation, Daniel Carter finally moved. He stood. He looked at the camera. And for the first time since his arrest, he spoke. Only 3 words. It's already done. At that moment, across multiple prisons in different states, routine systems checks flagged the same error. The same diagnostic signature. The one that was never supposed to exist. And officials realized the truth too late. The incident was never about one prison. It was about all of them.